In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about the workflow between Maxon Cinema 4D and Adobe After Effects. The two applications have worked really well together for a long number of years now, and that integration seems to be getting just tighter and tighter year after year, and it provides a number of benefits to 3D artists and also a number of benefits to 2D artists who are adding 3D to their toolset. So Cinema 4D, if you've not heard about it before, is best shown with a movie. Cinema 4D is really big in motion graphics and visual effects. And some of the examples in the UK include the ones that you see on the UK demo reel. So for example, for BBC, there's the Love 2013 sequence that's played an awful lot at the moment. We also work with studios like Smoke and Mirrors, so they do lovely, nice sequences like the Brit Awards there. The Sky 3D test sequence is all done using Cinema 4D. Animal Planet intro sequence here from WG Studios. So lots of examples, and Cinema 4D is known as a fully featured 3D application, which means you can use it to model, texture, light, animate. Another lovely piece here from Black Ops 2, so all the movies that you see in Black Ops 2 are done utilising Cinema 4D by SPOV. Moving Picture Company, another one here. But all the effects, you can see there's a great range of effects going on here, some extremely complicated, and Cinema 4D can do them all really, so you can throw whatever challenge you want at Cinema 4D, it'll get the job done for you. And you can mix in real life footage, or you can create everything from scratch. So for example here the person's of course real, and then adding in what might have been in ancient Britain. You can recreate buildings and breathe them to life, do all sorts of logo sequences, all kinds of stuff with Cinema 4D. The product itself starts from £600 ex-VAT, goes up to about 2,500, and depending on what your needs are, it depends on what product that you need to choose. So Prime is very popular for just starting out in 3D, whereas going right the way up to the top of the range, Studio, Cinema 4D Studio, is used for the more advanced effects like advanced character animation, hair, non-photoreal rendering like you're seeing here on screen, and all kinds of stuff like that. So advanced physics, simulations, all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff. So loads of examples that you're seeing on the screen here, and some can be fairly simple, you know, where you just need to illustrate something very quickly. So it's used a lot by people like BBC News for churning out graphics nice and fast. And the movements, all the animation tools are built into the tool itself, so you can do absolutely everything directly in Cinema 4D, and you can also mix it with film footage. So you see a lot of these have film footage in, and you can either comp that in After Effects using some of the really nice workflow tools that Cinema 4D has, or just work with them directly in Cinema 4D, it's up to you. So loads of different examples here that we're seeing on the screen, with all different kinds of realism. So the Cinema 4D itself has been around a long time now, some 20 odd years, and it's been developed in Germany. It's also got a number of international programmers now, some of which reside in the UK, and it's available in a multitude of languages, and it's very popular for all sorts really. So we're going to give you an idea of the workflow between After Effects and Cinema 4D in this example, because that's the most killer workflow that there is out there. It's a brilliant workflow for mixing in your footage alongside actual 3D animation. And you can see used by most of the studios that we're seeing on screen here, if not all. I think most of them use After Effects, which is great to see. So there we go, that's the demo reel done, and now we're going to get into Cinema 4D. I'm going to focus on two main areas today, and we're going to work with the two ways that you use Cinema 4D with After Effects. So the first way is starting in Cinema 4D and then going into After Effects, and then the second way is starting in After Effects, then going into Cinema 4D, and then back to After Effects again. So we're going to do these two little projects. This is the first one. So we create this in Cinema 4D, and then we add some further comping stuff inside After Effects. I'm going to show you why it's good to do that work in After Effects. So it's a fairly simple sequence here, but we're going to have a good bit of fun in there, and it should show you why you want to add After Effects to your workflow if you're a 3D artist and you want to start in 3D in the first place. And then the second project that we're going to do, where we start in After Effects and then we go into Cinema 4D, is this one. Very simple piece, but you can see that the 3D text added here looks like it's so I'll just make that a bit bigger. looks like it's falling on the floor. Now the floor is the film footage, and we use some tools in After Effects to create a solid that we can use with Cinema 4D to recreate that effect as if that text is actually inside the real life film footage, which of course it wasn't. So that's the second workflow that we're going to do. Now if you buy Cinema 4D and you buy After Effects, you need to install the plugins before the workflow will work. So this is really important, and if you don't read instructions like I have a habit of doing, you'll soon be stuck. So I'll just show you what you need to do to get it working. Cinema 4D works on a Mac or a PC. In this case I'm just doing this demo on a Mac, and you just need to go to Cinema 4D, which is in the Maxon folder in Applications or Program Files on the PC. Go into Cinema 4D R14, and then inside there you'll have Exchange plugins. Inside there you have After Effects, and inside there are two plugins, C4D Format and Importer. C4D Format will give you the ability to export a C4D format directly out of After Effects. The importer is for importing in files from Cinema 4D into After Effects, and that's basically the AEC file. So you need to grab both of those. So on each one, if you unfold, and as at Cinema 4D release 14 date, we support CS3 right the way through to CS6. So you just browse the appropriate folder. Inside there, you'll either find the plugins ready or a zip file. If there's a zip file, unzip the zip file, and then you get a plugin, a dot plugin that you can see here, and you drag and drop those into the After Effects plugin folder, which is inside After Effects. There's plugins, and you can see I've already dragged and dropped them in. So I've got C4D Format, C4D Importer. So that is critical. If you don't do that, this workflow will not work. Okay, so we've got our plugins installed. Now we're going to start the little projects. So I'll just close those, move them out of the way. And we'll start directly in Cinema 4D with this example here. Let's just go into Cinema. Okay, so I'm a little squashed on screen space here, so hopefully I can browse through all fine for you. But we've got a very simple scene here where we're just going to show you some of the very basics of setting up the workflow to After Effects. I'm not going to create a 3D masterpiece here. I want to show you the workflow and explain why it's good. So we can move around the screen in a variety of ways. So if I hold down 3, for example, and click on the TV, I can rotate around the sequence. And one of the most basic things that people want to do when they start is to create a camera animation. And one of the easiest ways to do that initially is just to work with moving around to where you want to start the camera animation. Create a camera, which you just click on this object here. Move to where you want to finish the animation, and then create another camera. I'm just going to move the cameras the other way round, and then double click on the first one and call it left cam. And double click on the second one, and I'm going to call that right cam. And then if I select the top one and hold down shift, select the bottom one so they're both orange, I can create a camera called a camera morph. And then what that does is it looks at the two cameras that I've selected and creates a morph between the two. So you can see that here, there's a blend option now. And what I need to do is look through this camera. So this camera is called Morph Camera. So I'll go Camera, Use Camera, Morph Camera. And you can see this has now been set up if I drag the blend. So the bottom right here is the Attributes Manager, which always shows the attributes of the most active object. Above that is the Object Manager here in Cinema 4D, and it's all hierarchy based. And then to record that is really, really simple. I'll just rewind my timeline. So you have a really simple timeline here. There's a much more complicated one which you can access in Window and then Timeline. But I'm just going to use the basic one for this. And anywhere where you see these little grey circles, if you hold down Control and click, you'll add a keyframe. And I'll just drag the timeline or click elsewhere on the timeline. I'll move the blend to 100%. Control click again, hit rewind and play, and I'm animating already. You can see I've also got a movie showing on the TV. That's a JPEG sequence which is just loaded in the material system. So you can load in your different movies directly into Cinema 4D, but there are reasons why you want to work this way, which I'll explain as we go into After Effects. So that's the first thing. We've got a basic bit of animation there. The next thing I want to do is add some compositing tags, which are really, really powerful and essential for the workflow to After Effects if you're interested in working with specific areas of the 3D scene. So for example, we've got a TV screen here, And if I select that, what I could do is add a compositing tag to that. So the tag I'm going to use is called external compositing tag. And this is really cool because it generates solids that I can use in After Effects, and it gives me positioning data. So I'll just grab the model tool, and I can see that this solid is the actual screen, the 3D screen, is 100 by 74. And what I can do with my compositing tag is simulate the same. So I'm going to say generate a solid for me, give me the anchor point bang in the center, which it is there, and then I'll change the size to match. So I'll do 100 by 74. What that's going to do is create a solid that I can use in After Effects, and I'll show you how I use it when I jump into After Effects. But I'm going to have a solid about the same size as the screen there, and it will move around with the 3D coordinates as it does in the area here, so I can use that for further compositing. The other thing that I need to do though is create a compositing tag. So it's slightly confusing because we have external compositing tag, which are basically ways of generating solids and other information for other compositing apps. And then we also have the standard compositing tag, which can do a huge variety of different things, like tell an object not to cast shadows, or tell an object to receive shadows, or be seen by transparency, and all sorts of stuff. But you can also use it to create object buffers, which are special passes, which are basically mats that you can use in other compositing applications. So I'm going to use this here, and I'm going to enable buffer 1 and buffer 2. You're thinking, why is he enabling the 2? The reason is I'm going to create another buffer. So I'm going to have a mask here that will be just the TV screen, but I also want a mask to be the entire TV for something else that I'm going to do in the project in a moment. And so I need to make this part of the TV, and I'll explain that why. So we'll just do that now. So if I go to the TV top, sorry, not the TV top, the TV itself, so you can see all the TVs highlighted there, I'll apply another tag here, and I'll also do a compositing tag. And what I'm going to do with this one is enable buffer 2. So buffer 2 is going to be the entire TV. So the reason why we added buffer 2 to the TV screen as well is I need to tell it is part of this buffer. If I didn't, what would happen was Cinema 4D would think, oh, he's enabled this as buffer 1, and that needs to be cut out of buffer 2, which is not what I want. So slightly confusing, but you need to remember that if you need buffers as part of objects. So that's what we're doing there. So if we go back to the screen, so I've got my solid set up, that's all done. The other way you can work is, rather than link a solid to an existing object, is to create another object and position it somewhere in the scene where you want the positioning data. So for example, I might want to put something on top of the TV. So you might remember from the sequence that we saw before that I had a robot walking on top of the TV. He was actually a movie sequence that I had inside After Effects, and I just dragged and dropped it onto the top of the TV, but I need some way of referencing him into the right position. So I can do that by creating a null object. So I go create null, and I'll just rename that TV top, and then I'll drag and drop that onto top. So these are the various components of the TV, and I'm going to use the object relative mode to position it nicely. So at the minute it's 181 below, minus 181, the top of the TV. So I'm going to highlight that, change it to 0, and tab and change the Z to 0, which is the forward and backward movement. So it's bang in the center of the TV top. And then I'll just move it along the x-axis, which is left and right, so it's over here. So what I'm basically doing there is creating a coordinate system that I can use with After Effects. And now I need to apply a solid to it so I can have that information inside After Effects. And it's exactly the same workflow. So once you know this workflow, it's always the same. So you go tags, Cinema 4D tags, external compositing tag. And this is where you can choose a different anchor point. If I wanted to anchor to the bottom left of that coordinate that I've put in, I just change it to bottom left in the anchor point, generate a solid. I could pick a different color, and then I need to pick a size as well. The size isn't essential, but that's how big the solid's going to be when you go into After Effects. So for the robot, I'll just give a rough one. I'll do 50 by 200 high. And that will create a solid that I can use directly in After Effects as well. The other thing that we need to do is talk about what we can apply as multiple layers when we render out the sequence. So inside Cinema 4D, when you go to render settings, which is accessed here, you've got a multipass option. And when you look at that, there's all these different things that you can have on separate layers. So I can have things like shadows on separate layers, or reflections, refractions, all kinds of stuff. If you're not sure when you get started, just go with either add image layers or add all, and then you'll get all the various properties of the individual render, and then you can play around with them in After Effects and see which ones you're actually using. So in this case, I'm just going to add image layers, so just the main ones. And then Cinema 4D automatically adds all of these ones to the scene. So some of these will be blank when I bring them into After Effects, but I'm just doing this quick just to show you. The other thing that we want to add here is a few more things. There's some special ones in here. We've got the object buffer. So we need one for object buffer 1 that we set up, and we also need another one for object buffer 2. And then the other thing that you can use, which is very popular with After Effects, is the depth pass here. And you can use that if you've set up camera blur, which I'll show you how we've set that up in the final scene in a moment. And then you can do your camera lens blur in After Effects as a post effect and utilize this depth map. So that's all the various different bits that I wanted to set up on here. And then all you do is you go to your render side. So we choose an output size. So Cinema 4D has all different presets. So for example, for film and video, we've got NTSC and PAL and widescreen, square pixel, HD TV, all sorts of ones. So for example, if I pick PAL, Cinema 4D gives you the presets already, and the frame rate and the film aspect ratio, and then you can jump in and change these if you want, or create manual ones. You can do for print, for all sorts really. You then go to your save page and choose a format that you want to save out as. So I could choose a TIFF sequence, or I could do a QuickTime movie or JPEG sequence. Choice is yours. And then the important thing is also to have the save file for the compositing project file for After Effects. There's also these other applications that Cinema 4D supports as well. So new Final Cut, Motion and Shake. You can do the same sort of stuff to those applications as well if you like. You choose a save path and then you hit render and away you go. So if we did hit render, for example, in this case it's going to moan that I haven't done a save path. Do I want to continue without saving? Yes. And then Cinema 4D will render the job for you. So it'll go through frame by frame as long as you've selected frame by frame, and it'll draw it. And then depending on the speed of your machine is how quick you'll get the render. When you come to render, it's all about the processors. So the faster the processors, the better. And you can see here that I've got several tiles going at the same time, and that's because my machine here has multiple cores in it, so it's taken advantage of multiple cores in the system. The other things in the machine that are useful, the more RAM you have, the more detailed the scenes can be, so you can have more texture information in the scene or more polygons. Good graphics card can help speed up editor refresh rate when you're moving around in the editor as well, so they're the various different bits. Cinema 4D does not make use of the graphics card when it comes to rendering those, so we don't have any of that. We only use the OpenGL side of the graphics card at release 14 point, that is. So that's the rendering. The last thing I just wanted to show you was we took this a little bit further in another file, just added a bit more animation. So I'll just show you that quickly. Let's just jump in to the right folder. And the only reason I want to show you this is, of course, you can do more complicated animation like you're seeing here. But if we just jump to the top view, basically the camera pullback here, you can apply front and rear blur to it. So if we look on the details, we've got front and rear blur on, and we've set that up. And if I just try and zoom out a bit, you should be able to see it there on the camera. So it's these little areas here. So that's set up. Just unhide it so you can see it a bit better. So front blur, rear blur, and that of course plays through the animation. So that's what we're going to take advantage of when we play with the depth map directly in After Effects. So that's just done in Cinema 4D for the minute. So I'll just close that down, and we'll jump into After Effects. Okay. So we're inside After Effects here. So hopefully when we've saved out the file, of course we've already done that because we don't want to wait around for the file. So each of the frames that we were rendering out was taking about 25 seconds on this machine. So it's not a huge scene by any means. We'll just jump into the After Effects files that come out. So out of Cinema 4D you get these following renders. So this was done as QuickTime movies just for speed and making it a little clearer to see what's going on. And the one that I want to show you here is this AEC file, which is the file that Cinema 4D generates when you say save an After Effects file. So what we get here is the comp, all of the individual layer movies. We also get our solids and our special passes. So there's our solids, and there's our special passes. So if we load the comp, and we'll just have a look what we get first of all down here, and if I just toggle the modes here and we scroll down, you can see really cool is that the individual layers, so where we've got things like reflection and refraction, shadows, etc., they all come in nicely named, and they're also set with their mixing modes correctly set up as well, so then you can play around with these settings directly in here. The solids also come in correctly, so you can see I created one for the front of the TV here and one for the at the top of the TV here, so I'm going to use those in a minute. I'm just going to turn them off for a minute just so you can see the original scene. And then of course we've got our special passes, so sorry we're a little bit limited on workspace here, but we've got a depth one and we've got a buffer for object 1 and object 2. And if I just play this scene, and it'll just take a little while just to bang it in RAM, and then we can keep editing it as we go. So that's the sequence that you saw before, but we haven't added the final tweaks to it, so we wanted to add a few bits and bobs to it, and that's where this workflow really comes into play. And I'm going to try and illustrate why you should finish in After Effects if you've got Cinema 4D. So one of the problems is when you've got a 3D scene, when you come out to do your render, it may take 10 minutes or it may take 10 hours or 10 days, depending on how complicated the scene is and how long it is. The trouble is, once you've got that final sequence, if there's a problem with it, you may have to go back and fix it. And there's two ways to do that. You can either fix it in Cinema 4D and re-render out, and you may have to wait a long time again. Or if you've got it in a file that's editable for After Effects and the stuff that you need to edit is on separate layers, like we have in this case, you can do your editing much faster and quicker directly in After Effects and do it on the fly. So let's see the sort of stuff that we can do. So little problems that I saw in this file. I want to have a little marching robot on top of the TV, and there's certain parts of the scene, particularly here, where the highlight on the TV kind of fades into the white background. And it makes it hard to see the edge of the TV, so I might want to tone down the highlights. Now if I'd already rendered this out and I didn't have this on layered information, I'd have to go into Cinema 4D, change the highlight, re-render the entire sequence, which is a huge waste of time, and I still might not get it right. If I've got it inside After Effects, like I have here, I can just play with the settings. So for example, let's go grab the specular layer and change the opacity, so I can just drag on it and lower the opacity to another setting like we see here. Oh, sorry, I'll just turn that back on. And you see now I can see the specular that a little bit better on the scene. The other thing that's very easy to do as well is do more complicated stuff. So I could go, for example, for reflection, drag it to the top, and I'll change it to normal mode. And if I just rewind back, you can see there's the reflections in the scene. And sorry, I'll just mix it back to add just so you can see the problem. A typical problem 3D artists get is when they try and add reflections to the scene, the reflections are usually not quite how they want them, because it's very, very difficult to get certain effects. So for example, in this case, I've got a white background and I want shadows and I want reflections and I want it to be as pure white as possible. And that's difficult to get even in real life. So what you can do if you've got this information on a separate layer is cheat to get the effect that you want. So the first problem we can see if I switch to normal is that the reflections themselves are very, very dark. So I could change the curves, for example, just to ramp these up a bit so we can see a bit better. So I just double click the curves and I'll just ramp them up so you can see that's looking a bit better. We can see the base of that. I'm just going to make this a touch smaller just so we can see a little bit as well. Change it to fit so you can see the rest of the reflection there. So that's helpful, that's definitely helping, but I need to do some more stuff. I want total control over those reflections. I've almost got it because I've got a black and coloured sequence. I've almost got a mask, but I need black and white. So I can use this to create a quick and dirty mask in After Effects. And to do that, I just Command D or Control D on a PC. And I've duplicated the layer here. And then with the top layer selected, what I could then do is go and grab levels and apply those to the scene. And then just ramp this up just so it goes really, really white. And what I'm basically doing here is creating a mask. So I've got a mask in the scene there. To give me a rough thing that I can cut this out with. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I've got a black and white option here that I can now apply as a mask. And then all I need to do is the layer below, if I change the track matte to Luma, it'll then cut out one and give me this example here. And I've got a couple of problems still, one of which is that the mask itself is very, very jaggedy, so I could fix that with a blur. So if I go for a blur, go for that one, and then I'll just apply a bit of blur, and you can see I'm blurring that out now, so I'm getting blurred reflections, which also take a long time to render inside Cinema 4D or any 3D application. They're quite complicated. That's good. And the other thing that I could do is then go back and tweak anything that I want. So for example, maybe I think those reflections are too strong, so I could go back to the layer underneath and change the opacity down to whatever I think looks good for those reflections. So you can see I probably only want about 20%, but I've then got much nicer reflections and I've got a bit of control, and now they're nicely blurred. So that's already an improvement over what we had over the original. So we'll just play that through and you can see much better. So we've got the reflections that we wanted. Okay, so what other things can we do in here? Let's just stop. Just rewind back. We could adjust the shadows, for example. So we'll just go and grab those. Where's my shadows? There they are. I'll just drag them up the top. It's a little bit difficult this because I've got this limited space here. So sorry if I miss things. And we could apply some various bits and bobs to this. So for example, we could apply the levels just to tweak the shadows very quickly and make them either darker or lighter depending on what we wanted. So you can see the control that we've got over the shadows there. So that's another typical thing that people have difficulty with, is getting the shadows just right for their scene, and this gives you the option to actually adjust those nicely. The other one that you could play with as well is the diffuse layer, which it just does the general colours of the scene. So here's the diffuse here, and we could apply curves for that just to finish things off. So I'll just double click those and just play with the curves just to try and get a bit of extra colour on the top of the TV there. So all these things would all be, re-render in Cinema 4D and waste a huge amount of time, but we're getting exactly the look that we want in After Effects because we've got all this layered information to play around with. So we also talked earlier about that we had, if I just scroll back up, these solids. What about these solids? What can I do with these? So there's a solid there in this scene there. So that's basically going to be a place for putting on various bits and bobs inside Cinema 4D. So we're going to play with those now. So I'm getting really so tight on space here. I can't get back to my original projects. So what I want to do here is I've got the option of, sorry, I'll just fold that just so I've got a bit more space. Loading in some additional footage, so which is of course very popular with After Effects. And what I've got is a little bit of footage in here called robot.mov. In comes my little robot, and we'll just have a quick look at him. So here he is here. We'll just play him for you. So little robot there. He'll take a little while to draw with the RAM player. But very simple sequence, just a little marching robot, and that's what I want to use in this example here. Now if I want to place that exactly where the object buffer, the solid is, I can do that very easily. So I'll just close that. All you do is you go and grab the TV top, make sure it's selected, and then hold down Alt and drag and drop whatever movie you want to place in that area directly on top, and in he comes. Now you may notice there that the colours of the robot seem to have changed slightly, and he's no longer on a bright white background, so we need to fix that. And one of the options you have when you're working with these solids is to use Cinema 4D's lights. So if we unfold the robot MOV now, it's on the solid. If we go into here, you see there's accept shadows, accept lights, and various other modes. So if I turn off accept lights, the robot will be unaffected by the lights in this scene, which in this case is what we need. So if that ever froze you, that's how you fix it. And then we just need to apply this nicely in the scene. So for example, we'll just grab scale, do uniform scale, and scale the robot down so he's roughly the right size in this scene. And then we just adjust him however we want. So we'll move the anchor point And if the anchor point is animated, you might want to just turn it off just so it doesn't animate. And then we just move the robot to wherever we want him in this scene. So I'll just move him down a little bit. And where I actually want this robot to show, I don't really want him at the start, I want to show him about here. So this sequence here. And you can see at the minute that's not quite right where the robot is, so I'll just move him up. And then I'll move him left a bit. And it's also really hard to place him because at the minute he's sitting on top of the TV, and what I want to do is give the illusion that he's on the TV, so I need some way of cutting him out. And that's actually really, really simple as well. So we'll do that just so we can see how to comp him in a little bit better. What we basically do is we go into our project window and we look at these special passes. Now if you look at the top left, you can see we've got object 1, buffer 1 and buffer 2. So buffer 2 is the entire TV, which is the one that I want to use in this case. So one little tip is at the minute the workflow between Cinema 4D and After Effects only allows you to name the objects by number, so 1, 2, or, obviously. So a good little tip before you go to After Effects is just note down somewhere what you've set object buffer 1 and object buffer 2 as. So it makes it a little easier to identify them into After Effects. Of course, you could rename the buffers before you jump in or once you're in After Effects. But anyway, to apply this buffer, all we do is we drag and drop it above this, and then we go to the robot underneath and we choose Luma Matte Inverted. And now it looks like the robot is on top of the TV and we're using this matte to cut it out, which is exactly what we want. So if we now scrub through the movie, we can double check that he's where we want him to be, and now we do our final editing of him. So I'll just move the anchor point again, just so he's roughly in the right place, like so. And that's really nice. That's what I want to do. So a couple of other things I want to do here. First of all is I want to give the illusion like he's walking along. So when he's up here, I quite like to give the animation some sort of movement as if he was part of the 3D scene. So what I could have a look at there is the position, and I could just animate the keyframe there and then just say by this point I just want to move him a little bit forward. In fact, let's have a look. So by about there, just drag him a little bit forward, just like so, and then we'll have a look and see what that looks like. And you can see there's a slight problem there because he's 2D, he's not looking quite right at the start. So in my original sequence I just hid him, which we'll do in a moment. Now he looks like he's walking forward, which is great. That's what I wanted. So we've got all of that. So we're just doing the RAM player because we've added new stuff to the scene. It needs to pop it back into RAM for us. And now we just need to get rid of him at the start because he doesn't look quite right. So for that we could use the opacity, and at the start we could animate and change opacity to 0, and then move to, for example, here, and record opacity again, and then jump over one frame so he instantly appears, change opacity to 100%, and then that should be good to go. That didn't work very well. What have I done? Oh yeah, there he is. So he's now appeared. So that's great. So we had another object buffer, and a really popular thing when you've got a 3D scene, and often there's all kinds of cuts where you have 3D TVs or big 3D screens and you want to change the footage on them in the piece. A couple of ways you could do that. You could go back to Cinema and re-render out the entire sequence. Of course, that's a waste of time. Or if you've got the object buffer that we had, you can do that really, really quickly. And it's just a case of going and finding your screen buffer. So we've got the screen buffer here, select it, and then I've got another piece of footage which I'll just load in, which is green footage. So the current footage on there was grey. So if you just want to replace, it's exactly the same process. So you just hold down Alt, make sure the screen is selected, drag drop on top, and then in it comes, and then you just need to scale it down. So we hold down click S for scale and scale it down so it roughly fits the TV. And now this is the typical problem. Of course, this aspect ratio is not quite right, so I'm just going to crop it a little bit. I don't want to crop it. Sorry, I'll just grab into a place where I can see. Yeah, about there. So I'll just scale that in just for quick. Now the problem that we've got here is that the edges of the TV on the original thing, if I hide that a minute, are rounded. So even if I get it spot on, this new footage, like most footage, has got square, sharp corners. So I need to change that, and that's where the other buffer comes into play. So we've got this now nicely on there, and all we need to do is pop the buffer on top. So I'll just pop this to the top just so we can see it better. And then all we do is use the other pass that we've got, which is this one here, drag and drop it on top, and then change the mode here. I just need to remember which way. Luma, I think this one is. Luma matte. And then out it comes, and I've just got to go back and scale again because I've got my scale slightly wrong. So we'll scale, just so it fits the whole TV like we've got there. And now you see it's nicely applied on there, and I can play with the position and all sorts just to get it precisely lined up, because it's just slightly off. There we go, and that's done. So that's how you play with all these various different solids to line up things nicely inside Cinema 4D, and hopefully that gives you an idea of the workflow that you've got. There was one other thing on here that I want to talk about, which is the depth channel. So a lot of people like to adjust depth of field in post because then they can get exactly the look that they are after. So I'll just let this play, and then we will move on to the last part that we want to do. Just let that play. Okay, right, so rewind. And the way to do this, really, really simple. We go to the diffuse layer, which is here, and we need to use another special pass that we made, which is this one here, the depth pass. And we drag and drop that under the TV diffuse layer. And then we just need to do the camera lens blur effect. So we select the diffuse layer again, we go camera lens blur effect. There it is. Put one of those on, and then we need to tell it how to do it. So of course you don't want blur over the entire sequence, you want to use a camera of Cinema 4D. So to do that you just pick the layer. So we're going to use the depth pass that we brought in, and then that will use that for the blur information. So we should see as we hit play now that it will utilize that as it goes through to blur the TV at the points that we set up. So of course this was just set up really quickly, so we'll see some blur. And of course you could do it much nicer. I'm sure you can do a much nicer job than me, but hopefully we should see a bit of blur as the sequence moves on towards the end. And hopefully so. You should see that's blurring now, and that is basically how you use the lot together. So we've got a few little minor issues left to do, but we should see a bit of blur just as the camera pulls out, and that's it. So that's how you use the various bits and bobs together, working that way around. So when you want to start in 3D and you want to go out to After Effects. Okay, so now I want to work the other way. I want to start in After Effects. Ooh, let's just close and move back to Project. I want to work the other way now. So I want to start in After Effects. So I'll just load in a file. And, oh, not that way. I'll go mad. I've just gone straight back in there again. Start in After Effects. Okay. So in this example here, I've got a piece of footage. I've got a little bit of text, which is sitting as a comp inside the comp. And then the important thing to say here is that we've taken the 3D tracker camera, and it's been moved to create a camera that matches the footage, and the orange region that we see here is a solid that we're going to send to Cinema 4D to help place the floor in Cinema 4D. So if we just play it, you can see it's a slow motion piece. We've got a bit of camera movement there. We've got the solid, and this all tracks nicely. So once that's done, you're ready to send it to Cinema 4D. So we'll just stop that now. So that's good. Go grab Cinema 4D, and we'll open up what we get in Cinema 4D. So to make it a little bit clearer, what I've got, let's just go grab the Cinema 4D files, is we've set up a simple scene just to show you a couple of little bits. So if we play the animation, you can see that we've got the movie playing in the background, and we're using that to help place the text. So just to give us an idea, and also think about the timing. Because this guy's in slow motion, I need to have a look at the timing when I basically make the text fall to the ground. I want them to fall at the same rate. Now, of course, the problem is we've got no matching information, so we've got no camera information, we've got no solid to simulate where we want to drop the text. So a couple of problems. Also for speed, we've created the text already, so we've got some 3D text, and we've fractured it. Now you can fracture stuff inside Cinema 4D using some of the tools in there, or you can use a variety of plugins, many of which are free, just to fracture them in different ways. So our text is made of hundreds, or if not thousands, of tiny little objects. Okay, so first thing that we need to do though is bring in the After Effects data, so we haven't got that in at the minute. So for that we use the merge tool in this case. You could just use open if you weren't bothered about bringing in all the background stuff. And what you get from After Effects in this case is the camera information and also the solid. So we'll just merge that in. And then you can immediately see that it looks wrong. And why is that? And it's because we're looking through the editor camera at the moment. So all we need to do is choose Use Camera, 3D Tracker Camera, which is the camera from After Effects. And now everything looks good. Okay, so let's have a little think what we want to do. So all I want to actually do here is take the text and make it look like it's going to drop and react with the floor, but the After Effects floor, so this what the skateboard is on, and smash into small pieces. The text is pre-fractured, and what I want to show you here is Cinema 4D's dynamic system, which makes it really, really easy to create these kind of effects. I'm just going to move the text backwards a little bit. So I'll grab the text, and I'll just move it a little bit back in the scene. And then to make this animate, it's really, really simple. So this is using Dynamics, which is part of Cinema 4D Studio. We basically use this, Rigid Body Dynamics. So it's a tag, simulation tag, rigid body. And we do one change. We go to the collisions page and choose Inherit Tag, Apply Tag to Children. And the reason why I'm doing that is I've put it on the parent object, and I want it to affect everything inside the parent object, all the children. So it'll automatically apply that tag to everything inside there. The other thing that I need to do is to give it something to react with. So I go to the skate crazy stuff that's come over from After Effects, and I choose the solid, and I can make that a dynamic object as well. So the object that I'm going to use is simulation tag, and I'm going to use a collider body, which creates a tag saying collide with me. So in comes the collider body like that, and if we hit play, we should already have something going on. Now, depending on the speed of the machine, this may take a while because I'm really pushing the machine here, because I'm giving it basically thousands of objects to calculate the collisions between, not only of the text itself, because that's all small segments, but also with the floor. So it may take a while to draw it and figure out everything what's going on. So my machine in this case is quite struggling with that sequence because it's so many objects. I'm getting an idea what it'll look like, but it's a bit hard to preview that and make sure it's right. I can see that the floor looks really, really slippery at the minute, which obviously isn't right. So if you want to preview this a little easier and you've got a complex scene, a good tip is to basically make it simpler. So in this case, what I could do is, okay, give me the effect just on one object. So I'll apply it to the S, and then hopefully I can see things a bit clearer. So I hit play again. And yet that's helping a little bit, so again a bit more information there. I'm still not getting the best of frame rates, so I'll just check. Yep. Okay, so still struggling a little bit with that, but I get a better preview than I had before. There's also something there that hopefully you can see. Some of it's falling through the floor as well, so we've not got the best accuracy going on here, and that's something to watch out for, and I'm going to show you how to fix that as well. But the first thing that we want to do is to stop this acting like ice. So there's some very simple properties that you change, and they're on the collision page. So we change the bounce, so that's how bouncy things are, and we'll change that to 0. And the friction, I'll change right up to 98%. And you also need to remember to think about the other surface, so that takes care of the text itself. We also need to do on the solid, so we grab the tag on the solid, and we do the same thing, bounce to 0, friction to 98, and that should give us a different result. And there, it's looking good. Apart from, we've still got stuff falling through the floor. Why is that? Well, Cinema 4D's system is set up initially to be for big objects. So if it was a solid S, that would be fine. It would collide with the floor nicely, no problem. The problem is that we've taken the S and we've changed it into tiny objects. So Cinema 4D's dynamics needs to be more accurate to get us a realistic result. And this mode is slightly hidden away, but this is a good tip if you want to get really accurate dynamics. What you do is you go to Edit, Project Settings, and then inside there you'll find a Dynamics mode, and inside there, Expert mode, steps per frame. The higher you set that steps per frame, the more accurate it will do things. So we probably need something like 40 to get this really accurate. So if we do it again, the downside of doing this is it's more complicated, it takes longer to calculate, so you don't want to have it up that high for most standard dynamic smashes. And you can see now nothing's falling through the floor, but it is taking longer, so the screen refresh is a bit slower. But we've got what we wanted there. The other thing that's quite nice in here, so you can see our text at the minute is falling faster than Todd is, and that's because Todd's in slow motion. So there's another nice thing in the dynamics area here and under project settings, which is time scale. So if I change that to 20%, which is just so happens to be the speed at which Todd is playing at, they should match. And it'll just start falling, and you can see that the timing is just right. So then you come to render out. So what we've done before rendering out, once that was set up, so that's all we, just stop the animation. It takes a little while sometimes if dynamics is started, because it's basically pre-calculated, so it's a little way through the frame. There we go, rewind. And I'll just close that off. So actually I'll just open another scene. I just want to show you the final scene. And what we basically done was remove the background, because for the rendering we wanted just a plain white background, just the text. And more importantly, the reason why we also wanted the plain white background is for shadows. So if I hit render here, you can see that we want these shadows. So we'll have shadows which we should be able to see on the floor and give the effect that the text is actually directly above the floor in the 3D in the After Effects space, even though it wasn't there originally. So that's just done in Cinema 4D. And of course you've got the same workflow like we saw before. You can have things on separate layers as well. So the multipass is set up again to output multiple layers for us again. So let's just jump back to After Effects and bring that information in and see how easy it is to place it in the scene. All we do, double click, and we go and find this one here, which is the AEC file. And we'll just bring that in. And we just drag and drop that in to the scene. So if we drag and drop it in here, it should then apply it to the scene for us. There it is. You think, oh no, I've got white background, still got that stupid orange thing. All you do is hide the orange solid, and then we need to work with our mixing modes. So we change the mixing mode. I think darken works rather well. And now it looks like it's on the footage. So that's how easy it is to work this way. So it's quite nice. Everything's matched up nicely now. And then you could just play around with this. So I'll just lock that and jump into this comp, close that. And then you can see I've got basically all of these individual areas of mixing that I can use like I had before. So I could go to the reflections and turn those down a little bit with the opacity. I could go to the diffuse layer and I could play with color matching. Is it color? I'm trying to think what it is. Color balance. That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry, I had a blank moment. And I could remove the saturation and try and make this look a bit more concretey, like so. And then I'm done. So you've still got the workflow that we saw before. And I can tweak this any way that I see fit. And it's all in there. So I hit play, and we're all nicely matched up straight away with the After Effects footage as well. So really nice workflow that you've got between the two apps. So hopefully that demonstration's showing you why you should work with the two tools side by side. why they're such a good match. There's nothing else out there that's quite as tight as the integration that you see between these two apps. Adobe and Max on work really, really well together, and hopefully that's been helpful to you.